More history. So we did the video this morning on the Florida Panthers team history. Now we're going to look at the 95-96 season. It's a year where things, again, there's some unpredictability in this, including how the Pittsburgh Penguins did that year. So your top 10 players in the NHL are back. They were not in the book I used yesterday. So the Hockey News went, we're not going to do top 40 this year. My guess is fans went, where's the top 40? And the Hockey News goes, fine, we'll do it. We'll do it again next year. So your top 10, Mario Lemieux number 1, Jaromir Jagr number 2. Worthy of note, they both play for the Penguins, of course. Number 3, Patrick Roy. So what a difference a trade makes. Number 4, Eric Lindros. Number 5, Peter Forsberg. And we're already into the is Lindros better than Forsberg? Is Forsberg better than Lindros conversation? And Forsberg's career is just getting going. Paul Kariya at 6. Chris Chelios at 7. Mark Messier at 8. Dominic Hasek at 9. And Raymond Bourque at 10. So this is a pretty good year for veteran players. Florida Panthers kind of dominate the headlines that year. They eke their way into the playoffs, and then they win, and they win a lot. And they surprise everybody. And the whole rat trick thing begins. And John Van Beesbrook's at his height of his career as a Florida Panther. And Doug MacLean as the coach leads them to the finals. His PEI roots make it a more interesting storyline. There are a lot of Canadians on this team, so while it's a team in Florida, and I always thought the Florida Panthers jersey back then was my favorite in the NHL. It was up there. But anyways, the Florida Panthers have a pretty good run, and yet we kind of know they're going to struggle to do it again. Once they get into the finals and they're against Colorado, that's where the fun ends for them. Colorado makes quick work of them. And Patrick Roy is redeemed with the Avs. So after all this talk about he's done, it's finished, you can't really... Can you rely on Patrick Roy? I don't know. Patrick Roy is probably past his prime. Roy was pretty good there. He had his Vezina trophies and all, but he's probably done. No. So he wins a cup there, and with Patrick Roy, with Sakic and Forsberg down the middle, with those guys down the middle, and just the team that they got put together in Colorado, we're already talking about dynasties. So right away, it's look at this roster. Who's going to beat them next year? This could be a dynasty. And it honestly looked like it should have been. This was a Colorado team that was absolutely fantastic in every facet of the game. And it was kind of nauseating, I would imagine, to Quebec fans watching all this take place. Thinking, yeah, if we'd had Patrick Roy in the playoffs the year before, we probably would have got out of the first round. No offense to Stéphane Fiset. So the Boston Bruins, they're out in round 1 versus Florida, 4-1. So Boston managing to get into the playoffs, putting together good records. But once the postseason rolls around, you see all their warts, all their flaws. And Blaine Locker, who had been a hero the year before, he's out. They buy him out, and they go, it's Bill Ranford, and then not much else. Oh, that's a bad idea, but we'll find that out as these videos go along. The Bruins are heading towards a dark period of time here, and as Neely's career winds down, Adam Oates finds his way out of town because he's not happy with the way things are being run. Steve Casper as a coach, it just doesn't work. There's a lot of things with Boston that don't work at this point. Buffalo, Dominic Hasek is the headline in Buffalo because the team's scoring, not great. The team's overall roster, not great. He faces a ton of shots for a team that's not rolling, not getting it together. And you kind of get the feeling that they're kind of wasting these great seasons from Hasek. It's hard to watch him year after year playing fantastic, and then Buffalo in the playoffs just doesn't have enough to get to where they need to be, and he's not winning a Stanley Cup for Buffalo. Chicago, the team is getting older, and they lack center depth behind Jeremy Roenick. So Roenick, who struggles with injuries that season as well, it becomes obvious Chicago doesn't have the depth there. And then in the offseason, they lose Joe Murphy, which we'll get to how they lose Joe Murphy. But it's another name that's gone off the roster. This is a team that's headed towards a rebuild. And Roenick, likely at this point, very frustrated with the entire process. This was a team that looked like it was going to win a Stanley Cup, a couple of years before that, and now it just doesn't look like it's going to happen, not with this roster. Dallas is miserable, 26, 42 and 14, and yet they're 3 years from winning a Stanley Cup. Yuri Lehtinen made his debut that year. Andy Moog, who claimed he could still be a starting goaltender. Well, interesting thing with Moog is that Roman Turek was coming in. And, of course, Roman Turek ends up being a star elsewhere. But Dallas knows they have a problem. And then Darcy Wakaluk ends up signing as a backup for Buffalo. So they have an issue in Dallas. And it's going to be a tricky time going forward. And yet, like I said, they win a Stanley Cup 3 years after that. It's crazy. All the pieces are there. There's all kinds of stars on this team. It's just a matter of getting them all to play together. And I don't just mean that they're the stars because they're the Dallas Stars. Ha ha, funny joke. No, I mean there are legitimate superstar players on this team. They just can't play properly. A team that did play properly during the season and set a record, the Detroit Red Wings, who won 62 games that year, a new record, to which every Montreal fan yells, hey, they had more games to do it, and we had 60, and we only lost to Detroit. Detroit goes 62-13-7. They lose in the conference finals in 6 against the Colorado Avalanche. But despite the Red Wings looking like they're getting further away, going from Stanley Cup finalists in 95 to being out in round 3 in 96, there is no rush to make a big change on this roster. There is a belief this roster is going to get it together, and it's the smartest move that the team makes. This is why when people talk about Tampa, and I say, you know what, I like what Tampa did this year, I like that they didn't panic. They win all those games during the regular season. They get swept in the first round. Other teams might panic and might say, oh, this team can't win. That's what people were saying about Detroit in 96. This team is not built to win. This team can't win a Stanley Cup. They're just too old. They can't compete with Colorado. Look what the Avs did to them. That's going to change. Edmonton. Glenn Sather guarantees playoffs in 97. Not only that, Glenn Sather goes a step further. He says, we'll never miss the playoffs again while I'm the general manager here. He also stated that it would be easier if he had the New York Rangers budget. Yeah, he said that. So we'll just take all of that and percolate it and set it aside, and then we'll look at how things turn out for the Oilers in 97. But it is interesting. And also, the Oilers needed to sell 13,000 season tickets by May 31st of that year in order to get financial aid from the NHL. So for Canadian teams where the Canadian dollar is absolutely awful and it's starting to take teams out of Canada like crazy, the Alberta teams are in desperate need of financial help, but they only get it if they show the fans are supporting them. Think about that. Well, we'd like to give you that help, but I noticed your season tickets are below 13,000. Be a shame if your team got moved. And this was the mood at that point. Colorado had come into the league via the Quebec Nordiques leaving. We're about to get to the Coyotes coming in via the Winnipeg Jets leaving. There was a real belief at this point that the Oilers were next. The Oilers were the next team to get moved, if not for Hartford. Hartford, of course, being the exception to this rule. The Hartford Whalers, Karmanos and the state are having discussions. They're not going to go anywhere, and Karmanos is going to end up having to move the team. I honestly think Karmanos, and I can agree with people that they don't like how he did it, I think he took over the team not knowing what he was getting himself into. I think Karmanos believed, I can just fix this. Yeah, I can fix this. I'll keep the team a minimum of 4 years in Hartford. And I think in the back of his mind, he was thinking, all I have to do is get us a new building. And I'll look great. And then pretty quickly he went, we're losing a lot of money here. And the state's not really helping us out. And we need that new building, and we're in trouble. So, with them unable to agree on things, everything's spinning its wheels in Hartford on a team that's still not making the playoffs. The LA Kings, they trade Gretzky to the Blues. They also trade Yari Curry away, Marty McSorley away. The dream of taking all of those Oilers from the 80s and winning a Stanley Cup in LA are gone. And they're going into a full rebuild with most of the vets being removed from an underachieving team. The biggest problem I had with the way that they did it was I didn't think they got enough back. And I didn't think that the prospects, the draft picks they got back were solid enough to make sense for trading out such superstar players as they did. So the LA Kings doing the rebuild, to me, the wrong way. But, they did win a Stanley Cup in 2012. So eventually they got it right. The Montreal Canadiens, they're out in round 1 against the New York Rangers. But Jocelyn Thibault's numbers for the Montreal Canadiens that year were better than the numbers put up by Patrick Roy with Montreal. So Habs fans, while they may be upset to see Patrick Roy win a Stanley Cup for Colorado after deeming he was done, and I'm sure the media the same way, they're pretty happy with Thibault. 21 years of age and seen as the future in the net for the Montreal Canadiens. This kid just, everything points to him being fantastic. And I'm gonna say right now, this is why when I see people saying, "Oh, we've got this great young goaltender, he's going to be awesome for years and years and years," this is why I always kind of go, hey, maybe. Because we've seen many cases in the NHL. You look at Blaine Locker, we're going to get to one with the Capitals pretty quick, and Thibault with Montreal, where it doesn't work. And at some point, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, things change. So Thibault does the best he can, again, at age 21, trying to replace Patrick Roy in Montreal. I don't envy what that kid went through. New Jersey. So they win the Stanley Cup in 95, and in 96, they were out of the playoffs. They get eliminated from playoff contention 2 days before the end of the season by the Ottawa Senators, who won 18 games all year. Yeah, and I remember watching that game, and I remember thinking, that was hilarious. That New Jersey wins the Stanley Cup, and there was plenty of talk about how they could do it again, but the problem was they weren't scoring enough, and they trade Claude Lemieux. And it's over a contract squabble, and I get it. The guy's kind of a jerk. But without Lemieux, they're not even in the playoffs, and he goes to a team that does pretty well with Claude Lemieux in the lineup in Colorado. So it's the first time since 69-70 season where the Habs go from a team that won the Stanley Cup to missing the playoffs. It is a stark contrast, and honestly, while we've seen other teams do it since then, it's not a huge surprise now in a league that's 31 teams big if a team wins the Stanley Cup and misses the playoffs next year. It was big news when New Jersey did it. And Lou Lamoriello, not happy. Not a happy camper at all. All of the progress, all of the wonderful stuff that happened that got them there in 95, it all falls apart in 96. And we're going to see things change out quite a bit before 97. The New York Islanders lose $12 million in 2 years. So this season and the year before, they lost a total of $12 million. They had 11,604 as their average attendance over 5 years, including this season, at Nassau. So this is why when I see people saying they should just go back to Nassau, that'll fix everything, I can remember this. I can remember half-empty Nassau Coliseum as well, when the team was miserable and really bad. They were 22, 50, and 12 that year, and yes, this is the year where fans chant, "We want fish sticks." This is the one video in the entire history where I could have worn the fish sticks jersey because the fisherman jersey only lasted the 1 year. The Islanders learned pretty quick, this rebrand is a disaster. We'd better unrebrand, and they went back to the Islanders logo. They tried to keep all the swirls and swishes and the colors, and Islander fans quickly went, no, we don't like that either. So it was a time where the team lacked an identity on and off the ice. Although Todd Bertuzzi's on this team, they're going to draft Luongo pretty soon. Things should look pretty good. Oh, they end up in Vancouver. Interesting. At least Luongo goes to Florida and then Vancouver. So things are dark for the Islanders. Things aren't exactly dark for the Rangers because they won't rebuild. So we're up to 96. It's a couple years out from winning the Stanley Cup, and there's a belief of, hey, we can get back there. We just have to find enough Oilers to do it. They're out in round 2 against the Penguins. They added Yari Curry and Marty McSorley to the team during the season from the LA Kings. And then they signed Gretzky in the offseason. So here we go. You got Messier, Curry, Gretzky, and here we go. And Kevin Lowe's on the blue line. They had Bukaboom at that point as well. It's let's try to keep everybody. And of course, these guys are all getting paid really well because they're in New York playing for the Rangers. The Rangers were not shy about spending money, which definitely helped to attract a lot of big names. The thing is, they're big names, but they're also over the hill. When you look at the way it is now, you can become an unrestricted free agent at a young age, 26, 27, right? Or if a team doesn't give you a restricted free agent, a qualifying offer, they can be unrestricted at 23 or 24. Back then, you had to be in your early 30s. So these guys who, if they come in as free agents, they're in their 30s. Their best years are probably behind them. They get paid like they're still superstars, but the production on the ice doesn't quite match their pay scale. And it's a formula that doesn't work for the Rangers at all. And there's some offense taken by Neil Smith if you suggest that the New York Rangers bought a Stanley Cup in '94, which was the talk of some fans back in '94. Ottawa, they have one 20-goal scorer, and it's rookie Daniel Alfredsson. One. That's it. They are no longer a first-year team. This is year 4. And we're watching Tampa become a better team. Ottawa is not. Alexander Daig, 50 games played, 5 goals, 12 assists, 17 points. This is when Alexander Daig is officially a bust. This is when Alexander Daig is just finished in terms of any expectation that he is going to be a premier player in the National Hockey League. It's not going to happen. So it's a really harsh wake-up call for Ottawa. It's a shame that Daig never came through the way he was supposed to, and it sets the team back quite a bit. Arizona, then Phoenix. End up being Phoenix after the 36-40-6 Winnipeg Jets get moved. They made a lot of they made some trades anyways, and it didn't help. They picked up Craig Janney. Janney gets a ton of points, but Craig Janney was in the midst of a miserable season with San Jose, and he wasn't able to salvage the year for the Jets. So they end up being moved to Arizona to play for as the Phoenix Coyotes for the first however many years until they became Arizona, and then it took me about a year before I stopped referring them to them as Phoenix, and now I should be referring to them as Phoenix, but I'm calling them Arizona because I beat it into myself that you got to call them Arizona. Anyways, so this team's spinning its wheels, and they leave Winnipeg, and this is despite all of the fan rallies, the attempts by businesses to save the team. It's not going to happen with the Canadian dollar being as low as it is, and they aren't able to agree on a new arena, and Arizona, at least we won't have to worry about arenas there, right? We're losing money, right? Why'd they move again? Anyways, Pittsburgh, unexpected Final Four run. And so this is one of those cases where a team will make a run to the conference finals, and it might hurt them in the long term. Because it gives you an idea that the team is closer to the Stanley Cup than they probably are. They pushed the Florida Panthers to 7. They lose, but if they had won that one, we would have had Pittsburgh against Colorado. You would have had Lemieux and Yager against Raw in the final, but of course we can't have nice things, so you have Florida instead. Florida was the better story anyways. Florida was the team of underdogs. It was a team of hard workers that came together, and they just squashed the life out of any hockey game they were in, and Pittsburgh was just their third victim. But Pittsburgh, with Lemieux also getting 161 points, the feeling is, hey, maybe things are getting better. Maybe we're going to get back to where we were in the early 90s. And of course, we know now in hindsight that doesn't happen. But it looks like good times for Pittsburgh, and a run to the Final Four is fun for them. St. Louis goes 32, 34, and 16. Mike Keenan trades a lot. A lot of players moved out of St. Louis. Remember I told you yesterday that they acquired Dale Hawerchuk as a free agent? Yeah, he's gone. He goes to Philly. And there's a lot of players that just go. He has no patience. There's no patience whatsoever. Again, it looks like he's playing one of those EA Sports NHL games. He's just trading everybody just for the sake of trades. And then, after the season, in what looks like a desperate move, he signs Joe Murphy to a 3-year, $10 million contract. And that's right, $3.3 million a year. Keep in mind, this is back in the mid to late 90s now, where people just aren't making that kind of money. League average would have been, I would think, $500,000, maybe less, maybe 300,000, 400,000, and they bring in Joe Murphy for $3 million a year, and he had the worst plus minus of any forward for the Chicago Blackhawks. So while the Hawks may miss his depth scoring, he's not a $3.3 million a year player, and I go back to without a salary cap, we would see more of that. Without a salary cap, we would see at least 1 or 2 guys every summer. We go, he's making how much? What the heck are those guys thinking? And it's just, well, we don't have a cap, so we can throw $7-8 million at this guy and see what it does for us and hope it helps us out. And for Keenan, he's just setting fire to everything. That's just kind of what happens in St. Louis with Mike Keenan at the helm. San Jose, misery has returned to the Shark Tank. They're 20, 55, and 7, and it's a miserable season. So the plucky underdogs that can win in the playoffs are replaced by just misery. And it's going to be misery for a little bit here. But, San Jose, at least they still have those really nice teal jerseys. People will always buy San Jose gear, no matter how poorly the team might be playing on the ice. No matter how great they are on the ice, I don't think their sales of jerseys and memorabilia really get affected. Not adversely, anyways. Tampa Bay Lightning make the playoffs for the first time, and Darren Pupa was named the best goaltender in the NHL by the Hockey News that year. Pupa's one of those guys that it's odd, He had the great year with Buffalo, and then it kind of fell off, and then he has this great year with Tampa. And he kind of taunts you with the idea that he could be an elite level goaltender, one of the top 5 best in the league without any argument. And then it just falls off. And whether it's injury, indifference, whatever it is, the inconsistency from season to season is there. But for this year, Pupa was fantastic, helps get Tampa into the playoffs. And they play a very gritty, tough style against the Flyers in that first round. They push them to 6 games. It was a tough series. Philadelphia emerges from it, not completely unscathed, but good year for Tampa. Toronto's below 500 for the first time in 5 years, and the frustration is huge. This is a team that looked like they should win a Stanley Cup as recently as '94, and they're just falling out. Potvin still playing very, very well. However, Don Beaupre comes in as the backup, and a late deal, and he bombs. And going into the following season, it doesn't look like they have anybody to back him up. Cousineau is there as the number 3. Beaupre still listed as the number 2. And so for Toronto, it looks like it could get worse before it gets better. But again, Potvin, solid goaltender. I think, and again, we come back to how things work. So when you've got the media that in Canada is based so much in the East Coast side of things and in the Toronto area, you're going to overrate players. And I think Potvin was overrated at times by Toronto fans and media. However, I think that because there's always that backlash against it, I think fans outside may forget just how good Potvin could be. So Felix the Cat was pretty good at times. Was he the absolute greatest? No, but there were times where I saw Potvin take criticism that I didn't think was warranted. Vancouver's below 500 as well, and they're slowly sinking. You've got McGillney, you've got Bure, you've got all of these really solid players, but it's falling apart. And then they cheap out on Ronning. Ronning ends up going to Arizona. And I will never forget hearing Brian Burke on the radio saying that Cliff Ronning wasn't worth $1 million. And yelling at my radio, yes, he is. He was on Dan Russell's Sports Talk. And I remember hearing that and going, are you crazy? Because he basically said, Ronning wants too much money. We're not going to pay him that. He's not, and then he was naming off other Canucks, like he'd be paid more than this Canuck, and he's not worth more than this Canuck. And I kept saying, he is. He's fantastic. Why are you letting Ronning leave? What are you doing? I understood the team was below 500, they were sinking, but when you take your team's weakest point, which is center, and make it weaker, it's the equivalent of saying, okay, the Titanic's sinking. If we hit the iceberg again, I think we can fix the problem. So Ronning leaves, and this is where I checked out. This is where I said, I'm done. I don't care. They lose in 6 to the Colorado Avalanche in the first round. The Avs, they gave the Avs a test, but in reality, they weren't on the Avs level at all. Not offensively, defensively, or even in net at this point, where McLean is no longer that top 3, top 5 goaltender. So things are getting kind of ugly. Washington, things are going well during the regular season. Jim Carey, he wins the Vezina. He was the runner-up for the Vezina the year before. He is the first goaltender to ever be a winner or runner-up in both of his first 2 seasons in the NHL. That surprised me reading that. That actually kind of surprised me. And that is a trivia note that I would be very surprised if it's happened again since. Rookie goaltenders doing that is almost unheard of. And Kolzig's still waiting his turn as the backup. Of course, they lose in the first round against Pittsburgh because it's hockey, and the Penguins against the Capitals. It's a bad matchup for the Capitals. That's the way, historically, that it works. But there you go. You guys are all caught up on what happened in the 95-96 season. And, we're out of the lockout shortened season, but we'll have another one of those to come. And and there's that whole season that gets missed. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the season that got missed. Just skip it or talk about it again. I've talked about it a couple of times in videos, although there isn't a whole lot of stuff to talk about from the year that didn't happen. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.